Ya ALWAAZ. Today is Tuesday, September 15th, 2020 at 8 p.m. Pacific Time. I would like to welcome you to Dr. ABDUL Hassam's lecture. He will be discussing The Battle of the Soul, Virtues versus Vices, Part 2 of 3. Have you wondered how the mind works? Are your thoughts out of control? Do you experience endless chatter in your mind? In this three-part lecture series, we will explore and address the following questions, amongst others. How do virtues and vices affect your body-mind complex and eventually your soul and spiritual life? In what ways has neuroscience begun to recognize and validate the spiritual claims about negative effects of the mind? We hope you enjoy.
At this time, I would like to call upon Zebunisa to go ahead and recite our Ginan.
Bismillah. Eji sami tamari wari mahi Gura birama si chanahara Nave khande me si charopya Sami si che ananta apara Eji milore sara milo ભાઈ આપણા જીવડાને ખાતા વહર વસ્તુ ચાર માણેક ધરો નીલાડ આઈ પંચભૂને તમે Eji apana bana duratuka Puraka ginana kamawo Nara pirashade pirashama shabolya Amine.
Shukr. Thank you, Zebunisa. That was beautiful. Dr. Hassam, we are ready whenever you are.
Yali Madat Nawab, thank you very much for being here this evening, along with all the other co-hosts. And thank you very much, Zebun, for this lovely Ginan by Holy Pir Shamsh. And hopefully it serves a wonderful base for the subject this evening, the battle for the soul, the vices versus the virtues. You heard in this Ginan one particular phrase that says, Panjabhune Tamevaro. These 5 boos, as they are called them, they are actually the 5 vices. And Holy Pir Shamsh says, kind of get rid of them. Get rid of these 5 vices. And indeed, that is what we are going to be addressing this evening. What are those vices and what are those virtues? So I have a pre-recorded verse of Ginan that refers to the virtues, and we'll come to it at the right moment during the course of the lecture. So by way of introduction, this part 2, in referring once again to the title of the subject, which is The Battle of the Soul, I want to bring to everyone's attention once again an important focus so that we don't get lost into the detail, but always keep uppermost in our mind the purpose why we're doing this. And why are we always starting with a part of the Ginan? We have so many other options. Well, the reason being, as you probably already know, and I need to re-emphasize that, because if we do not emphasize it, there may be a possibility that we get lost into the details and then we forget the purpose. And how can I summarize what I want to say? I want to quote before you a teaching of one of our prophets, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His name was Idris Nabi, Prophet Idris. And Prophet Idris is known among the Greeks as Hermes, Hermes, and is known among the Egyptian as Thoth, Thoth. And he has other names. Something interesting I share with you, unrelated to the subject, nonetheless important. Who was this Idris Nabi? Idris Nabi is known to be the first person, of course, as a prophet, but the first person who introduced the sciences in human society. The notion of science, both spiritual and material science at the level of people at that time, came from the teachings of Idris Nabi, and also known, as I said, as Hermes. And there is a body of literature that is still available for people to have access on Hermes. And we can see a lot of this contribution during the time of the Egyptians and during the time of the Greeks. And one of the amazing preservation of Idris Nabi is called the Emerald Tablets. The Emerald Tablets. And in these tablets, if you read this text, it is going to probably send you into a thinking odyssey, because you will come to realize how this prophet and the message that he brought from heaven was so amazingly scientific. So what did he say? And let me tell you what he said related to my subject this evening. Idris Nabi said, he said, if you wish to learn in what condition the soul will be when it has come out of the body, when it has quitted the body, observe in what condition it is while it is joined with the body. So right now, the soul is joined with the body. You know what happens? When the soul leaves the body and it quits the body, there's no longer any sign of life in the physical body. So Prophet Idris is saying, if you wish to know in what condition your soul will be when it leaves the body, then observe. Observe in what condition it is while it is joined with the body. And you know, this is not a once in a lifetime exercise that you ask this question. This is a daily exercise, if not many times during the day. And the question is, in what condition is my soul right now? Do you know why I say that? Because no one knows when this soul will exit the body. Do you know? No one knows. And you know why no one knows? Because in the Holy Quran, and I quote this verse many often, very often, and you can once again look at this another layer of understanding. Allah says in the Quran, Al-Ru min Amra Rabbi. You know, this ayat came about as a result of people who were asking the Holy Prophet, Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that what is the soul? And they keep asking the Holy Prophet, what is the spirit? Ruh. The word ruh actually means spirit, but we say soul. What is the meaning of this spirit? What is it? Because we can't see it. And a verse came to the Holy Prophet. By the way, before I say it, in the Quran it says that the knowledge of which we have given you but a little. In other words, the knowledge about the soul is not something you just get it every here and there and everywhere. No. Allah has kept that knowledge very, very guarded, very secret. In fact, it is known to be the secret of secrets. The spirit, the soul, and there's a reason for it. But fortunately, in our tariqah, our beloved Imams, right from the time of Hazrat Maulana Murtaza Ali sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all the way down to our beloved Imam today, and all the teachings that our holy peers have given, is directly related to this secret of secrets. This is one of the reasons why I, in all humility and understanding, try to convey the importance of Ginans, because what you'll find about the soul or the spirit or the Ruh or the Atma in the Ginans as taught to us by the peers, you are not going to find it anywhere else. And that I can tell you in utmost humility, to the best of my knowledge and understanding, having explored so many dimensions of various literature, you will not find this inner meaning anywhere else. You know, this is perhaps one of the reasons, among many others, that our beloved Imam encourages the Jamaat to keep the meanings of the Ginans in our hearts, and they have to be preserved for generations and generations yet to be born. Because it is not that this information is going to be outdated anytime soon. So that's very important to bear in mind. So the verse in the Quran says, Al-Ruh min Amra Rabbi. The soul is by the command of my Lord. The soul is by the command of the Lord. That means we as human beings, we have zero control on the soul. You have control to some degree on your body. You may have control to some degree on your mind, but when it comes to the soul, no. Zero control. You have no control when that soul came into your body in the womb of your mother, and you have no control when the phone call will be made to the angel responsible, and his name is Azrael, and he will come, not Azazel, Azrael. When he will receive the phone call, the divine phone call from the divine Lord, and Mawla will tell him, go and get the soul. Tell him to come home. That's what we call death. And when that soul comes out, that is the time, if you haven't already been smart about it, you will begin to realize in what condition is my soul. That's why Idris Nabi is saying here, if you wish to learn in what condition your soul will be when it has quitted the body, observe in what condition it is while it is joined with the body. Now, what does he mean by observe? Can you see your soul? You may be able to, but can you actually see your soul? Observe you means you have the ability to feel, very important word, to feel and understand within yourself in what condition this soul is. Imagine, God forbid, if the soul should come out of this body and no one knows when, and then you suddenly realize and says, oh my goodness, I am now out of this physical world, out of this physical body. Where am I going? And what is it am I going with? I have nothing with me to show for. Why is that a problem? Because that is the first stage of the day of judgment. And you know why? In this case, Idris Nabi is asking, observe the soul while it is in the body right now. It is because we are supposed to think that what are we doing about our soul so that when it leaves this mortal body, with the soul takes with it those elements and items that are pleasing to Mawla. It is the intention is to please him, so that if you are able to please him with the things that you will take with you, then the pleasure of Mawla, when Mawla Bapa is pleased, you will earn that salvation of your soul. And you might ask, but where is he going to acquire that pleasure? So let me give you a hint, but that's going to be a separate lecture altogether. The hint is the day of judgment, the day of resurrection. But what about it? Did you know, according to our tariqah, on the day of resurrection, on the day of judgment, there is going to be a huge market. A market? Yes. Just like when you go to a market to do your shopping for your food, and when you go into markets to buy things in different stores and so on. But it's going to be, imagine this huge market that has, all the souls that has ever been there, and they are there in this huge market. And you may well wonder, well, who's going to be the clients and the customers? There is going to be only one client. One. And that client is going to be Mawla Bapa himself. And Mawla Bapa is going to become our client on the day of Qiyamah, on the day of resurrection. And in that market, he's going to come and he's going to say, what have you got from me? What is it that I can buy from you? Now you think about it. This saying of Prophet Hermes, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says, observe in what condition your soul is now. So this is a kind of pre-warning, and I have mentioned in some of my talks in the past that in accordance with the knowledge and teaching of our tariqah in Islam, we are always asked in our tariqah that you are in this world to plant and sow the seeds every single day. And you can plant those seeds by verbal action. You can plant those seeds by your mental actions. You can plant those seeds with your physical action. At least these are the three main categories. And these seeds that you are planting into this world will give rise to the fruits eventually. And the idea is you are supposed to pluck these fruits with you when the soul leaves this world and take it with you. and take it with you where? In the market of resurrection, the market of Qiyamah, where Mola Bapa himself is going to become. He will be the buyer, and he will come to the believers, to the faithful, and say, what have you brought for me? What is it that you have that I can buy from you that you can please me with? So now, having said this, now it's a wonderful topic, and I'm going to, inshallah, address it. I'm going to take advice from you and from those who are part of our team to see whether this would be an interesting topic or not. But one thing is for sure, no matter how you would like to view it, there is going to be the departure from this world. That is, when the soul will leave the body. And I know there are many people, sometimes out of love and affection, they sometimes make this joke, and they said, you know, I'm sitting in the departure lounge, and you and I know what that means, and they know what that means. And as a result of that, it's a kind of an awakening when people say that. So the idea is that we are going to die. There's no questions about it. And every single day, we are approaching that line, but we don't know where that line is. We don't know where that line is. And so we ask ourselves the fundamental question about this battle of the soul, that I'm going to quit my physical body, and the time will come that when the soul leaves this physical body, guess what? There is a day of judgment at the time of death. But that day of judgment is called the small day. It's called Qiyamat al-Sagir, the small day of judgment. And then there will be this great day of judgment, the great day of resurrection, when it's actually titled Qiyamat al-Kabir, the big one, the big day of judgment. And both of them are there. So be prepared, be ready. And this is why a subject like the one we are taking today about the battle of the soul, it's an important one, because our holy peers have warned us about the kind of actions that we do that can actually undo all the good things that we are doing. So let us proceed, and let me quickly recap what we said in part one so that you can conveniently connect with what I'm going to follow up with. Do you remember in the part one I had mentioned to you that the mind is made up of subtle matter? So let me quickly explain that, because I didn't explain that last time. Why do we say subtle matter? Well, we say subtle matter because I think I did give the example about solid, liquid, gas, and then even more subtle than the gas. And remember, this is still all material. The only difference is, in the material world, you can see the solid and its variant like liquid, although it is liquid, not literally solid, and it is gas, not literally solid, but you can still experience what a gas is. But then beyond that, our sight is limited. We cannot see a higher state of physical matter. And you know, I say to you, there is solid, liquid, gas, call it plasma, there is superplasma. There are actually 7 states of matter, and they are matter, it's material. But according to our science, we cannot yet understand the higher states of matter. And we will eventually, when we make further progress in the field of quantum mechanics, whereby we are beginning to understand material content in terms of fields. And I mentioned that to you because this notion of fields are very important even for the physical body. And there is an entity, when I say entity, I mean there is such a thing that today that is kind of acknowledged, that everything that is outside of us, that we cannot see, that it is actually part of it, is part of a quantum field. And how this interaction takes place between us and that quantum field is absolutely magnificent to understand. And I hope with Mola's grace and blessing and mercy that I can have the ability to convey that to you in a manner that would attract you, and you would appreciate how fundamentally, deeply the teachings in our tariqah goes, when it goes even to the interaction between the material content of the material realm and its transition through this quantum field. Let's see how we can move forward with that. So why am I saying that the mind is made of subtle matter? And why is that important? Because remember, if you take something solid, it's not that easy to make an imprint on it. It's easier to make an imprint when something is more flexible, supple. The same thing when you think about the mind, which goes beyond the solid, beyond liquid, beyond gas, beyond plasma and above. In fact, when I say subtle matter, the purest, this is very important, the purest, finest, the most exquisite level of matter that can exist, it's the mind. And God made the mind, created the mind out of that very, very pure substance, so subtle, but so pure, but also so impressionable and so malleable. Haven't you ever wondered sometime how come when it comes to the mind that, it's like, remember the quotation I gave you last time, what Mystic says? The mind is like the wind. You have no control over it. And the whole idea of achieving control is one of the battles that we are facing. So the notion of subtlety of the mind is important, because if you start putting into the mind field all the garbage, and remember what I just said to you, it is made of the most subtle, the purest of the material. Now, I didn't say spiritual. I said material. The finest, purest material thing. Now, you start putting garbage in there. What do you think happens to your mind? You can no longer, your mind rather, can no longer express or transmit its purity. So, bear this in mind as we progress. What did I say about the mind? That the mind functions on borrowed consciousness. So let me explain that very quickly again. There is the soul, there is the mind, and there is the body. And the body has 5 senses, that is the 5 senses from the outside and the 5 organs that correspond to it within the physical body. I'm only saying 5, actually altogether there are 10 organs, as I said, the 5 outside and the 5 inside. So the 5 outside are their outer station. Why am I saying that? Because the mind that is between the soul and the body, it cannot come into contact with the physical world because of the nature of where the mind is and the gross nature of the physical world. It can only come in contact with the physical world through the five senses. That's why we say the mind functions on borrowed consciousness, meaning that it is the power of the soul. You take the soul, the power, the light of the soul that goes through the mind, and the mind focuses that power on the brain and the heart, and they become the basis of transmitting that light into the organs, which then interacts with the five senses, and then it becomes the input data for the five, from the five senses to the five organs to the mind. And this is the simplest way I can explain it. So when the mind is exposed to all those aspects, the mind starts collecting sense impressions. But what is important to remember, and please don't forget this part, that the mind has no power of its own. The mind is not an entity that is independent of its own. The one and the only absolute reality that exists is the soul, is that inner self that we call Ruh or Atma. That is the real you. And its power, the light of its power, which is the light of this consciousness, goes through the mind, and from the mind, as I mentioned, it filters through the heart, and from the heart to the brain, and those physical organs become the basis of our life, physical life. And then the other five organs, the five senses, interact with our inner organs. You know, when I say organ, I mean the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin, and so on. The five senses. And they become our input elements. So the mind feeds, just like the body feeds on food, the mind feeds on the senses. And these objects of senses are the ones that we need to be tactful and careful, because this sense data, as I mentioned last time, is the basis by which creates our perception and our memories. So what is creating our thoughts in the mind? The sense data, the input, which is our sense perceptions, the five senses interacting with the world, which eventually becomes our memories. Now look at this. I hope you're following my logic. Don't lose the trend of thought. So what is the mechanism of the mind? I've said to you before, sense data that is coming externally from the external world. And these sense data, they translate themselves into thoughts. And when these thoughts are continually repeated, one after the other, for a long time, they become your habits. And when these habits persist, as a matter of fact, any aspect of your sense data persists, guess what? Remember the mind? The mind is very subtle, made of a material that is the purest. It is very malleable. And you intake negative thoughts, or basically your sense experience create these negative thoughts. And remember what I said about negative thoughts in my first lecture? It is these toxic thoughts, we'll come to them in a second. It is the toxic thoughts that create these negative emotions. And I'll speak more about emotions in a few minutes. But right now, I want you to think that these negative thoughts that creates negative emotions, and these negative emotions that basically, if you allow them to persist and you repeat them over and over, because that is the nature of negative emotions, and people fall trapped into it, they become part of very powerful impressions. Very powerful impression. It's like you take your hand and let's say you go to the beach and you put your hand on sand, what do you find? Now you have your impression of your hand on the sand. Or you put ink in your hand or color in your hand, and you put your hand on a piece of paper. What happens? The imprint of your hand is now on that piece of paper. So that piece of paper, it's like your mind. And all these toxic negative thoughts that create negative emotions, they are creating an impression in your conscious mind, which eventually, through repetition, goes into your subconscious mind and becomes your memories. So what then happens is that these impressions that are created into your mind, remember the hand with the ink on the piece of paper, the hand on the sand, these impressions are then in your system. And at some point later, when these impressions resurface, and you may wonder, why would they resurface? Because you have a mechanism, every human being has, that will trigger that memory. It will resurface and replay. There are negative memories. And when you do not allow yourself to arrive to some level of control, then what happens? These memories, they keep playing and replaying, and in various forms and shapes and form and shade, and it drives you crazy. And every time these things happen in some shape or form, you know, there is this blah, 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 blah that goes on inside your mind. You know, it self-talks. When you see something happen in front of you, let's take a very frivolous example. You know, let's say that you have constructed memories related to suspicion about someone. Let's say you have these memories based on suspicion. Now remember, they are not real in a sense, they're real to you, but it's suspicion because it's not based on evidence. And let's say suddenly an object goes missing. Immediately, the missing object activity will trigger into your mind and saying, it must be this person who took my object, because you triggered the suspicion. And now your mind starts doing the blah, 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 you know, oh my God, what did this person do with this object? I need to find out. And all those negative things starts coming in. I'm going to tell this person this and that. You know what I'm saying? So this is the replay of these negative impressions. So these impressions, they sink into your subconscious mind. And like I said, sometime or later, they resurface and they replay. And they are basically, this is how your memories are made. So at this stage, you have to ask yourself, is this how my memories are? Because this is the input that you've put in. And let us hope and pray that that's not the only thing that you have actually put into your mind. So this complete cycle keeps on going on day and night and keeps replaying and so on. So the many questions people ask, well, how do I stop this? And, you know, my mind is driving me crazy and I'm not able to concentrate. And then you have to understand what concentration is all about. And I'm going to speak about concentration today, hopefully if the time permits me. And please don't worry if the time doesn't permit me today, because I told our hosts today, and I told Nayab that I'm trying to finish by 9:30 today, because we do this in the evening, and therefore we hopefully allow people to retire at a decent time. But if we can't do it today, we still have a part 3 next week, and I'll take it on. But I really want to cover the vices and the virtues today. So I've already said something in terms of the input. So we will not repeat that right now. And you can, when you have time, listen to my earlier lecture. Now, let me add one or two new things as we move into understanding this whole notion of the vices and the virtues. You know, when I'm speaking to you about thoughts, because it's very important to know that your thoughts can have an effect on your brain, your thoughts can have an effect on your body, and your thoughts can have an effect on your life. And remember, in our holy Gnans, our peers has mentioned the construct of thoughts through the mind, and it says man. The word man is used in a variety of ways in our Gnans, and always in the context of having to control this mind and what the mind is sucking in from the external world, that you are allowing your mind to basically being absorbed and influenced with. So as a result of the fact that your thoughts can have an effect, can be positive and negative, on your body, on your brain, and on your life, makes a very significant effect. Now, why do I use the word brain? Because remember what I just said a minute ago. The brain is one of the organs where the mind transmits its light, depending on how much light you have allowed the mind to transmit. And I'll come to that shortly. So, to continue, when I say influence on the brain, influence on your body, and influence on life, another word for the word life in this particular case is your heart. It's your heart. And then the influence between the heart and brain combined. I spoke about it yesterday, and so please review that lecture, the marriage between the heart and the brain, what we call the heart-brain coherence, or the heart-brain harmonization. So when there is heart-brain coherence, what happens? So let me today go a little further than I did yesterday, and I know this lecture is different than the one yesterday, but they are interrelated, and in the interest of time, I'll not go back and repeat what I said everything yesterday, because I want to take it further. So what am I saying that's new today? When we think about this heart-brain coherence, now don't forget my preface. I said your thoughts can have influence on your body, on your brain, and on your life. And a life is defined as your heart. So heart-brain coherence means that we are moving from thinking to doing to being. This is a parallel of brain, body, and life. So brain is related to thinking, body is related to doing, and life is related to being. Another way to put it to you is related to the brain-mind harmonization or coherence is we are moving from knowledge to experience to wisdom. So now knowledge is related to brain, to thinking, and of course to knowledge. And then it is related to body, to doing, to experience. And then life is related to being and to wisdom. Are you following me? I'll summarize in a minute. And then this is the same thing when we speak about heart-brain coherence. It's like going from mind to body to spirit or to the soul. Mind, body, and soul. It is also, if I can put it this way, another way is to say it It is learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, and knowing it by heart. So do you see this correlates? Do you see the correlation when we say harmonization or the marriage between heart and brain and the heart-brain coherence? So very quickly, your thoughts can affect your brain, your body, and your life. Consequently, in the context of heart-brain coherence, it means moving from thinking to doing to being, continuing that in terms of another layer of our being, from knowledge to experience to wisdom, going into another layer, a higher layer, going from the mind to body to soul. And as I said, from a very practical point of view, it means from learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, and knowing it by heart. So how did I begin this part? I mentioned your thoughts can have an effect. Do you see how that effect is, from the physical senses of the brain to body to life, and how eventually it goes to these different layers? So this is another way to basically understand the brain, the heart-brain coherence. Okay, and in this particular segment of what I'm saying to you, the important key is always to remember that your thoughts can have an effect in all these layers. So bear this in mind as we get into the crux of things. Now, before we do that, I still need to say something to you about emotions, okay, because this is the right place for you to be able to contextualize the whole notion of emotions. Now, what are emotions? I struggled with it because, remember, we can feel our emotions, remember. We can see our emotions come and go. We can see we have positive and negative emotions, but you can't see your emotions. You can feel them. So if that being the case, what is the point? Emotions are a record of the past. How is that? Bear with me and you will see what I'm coming to. Emotions are a record of the past. This is very important to put into the right context. Emotions are the end product of past experiences. And as a result of that, if you are living your life from some familiar emotion, that emotion is what is basically driving your hormones of stress. Remember the relationship. The hormones of stress, as long as you are thinking within that emotion. Now we could say then that you are thinking in the past. So if emotions are records of the past, and emotions are the end product of your past experiences, and if that emotion is basically the one that is running your thinking and everything else, then you are living in the past. I mean, it's just that logical. Come back in a second. Then what's the solution, you might say? Now, before I get into it, I do want to emphasize, I have simplified it to the nth degree so that I can have this dialogue with you without going into the intricacies of the pathology from mind to body. There is a very interesting, completely justifiable on all the principles of neuroscience we understand today about the effect of the mind on the body, and there is a neuroscience governing our understanding, which tells us what kind of neurochemistry we experience, what kind of biochemical changes happens into your body, what goes into your bloodstream and creates the toxicity or creates the happiness, and how the brain reacts to all of that, and so on. And all of that has a very strong connection to our feelings and our emotions. So I kind of struggled in my mind, to what degree do I give you the details? And I'm really happy to give you, but it requires, as I said, time whereby I can continue to translate these layers so you can see what it means when it comes to the body. But I'll mention the key relevant part as it applies to my presentation this evening. So what is the solution? The solution is, the solution to this problem about living in the past through the emotion is not thinking within that emotion. But how do you do that? Well, the idea is you have to get beyond yourself. You have to get beyond that emotion. And when you do that, when you are able to get beyond yourself and beyond those emotions, meaning beyond your past, now you are no longer viewing your future or yourself through the lenses of the past. Quite the contrary, the side effect of that is that you begin to see possibilities that you never saw before. You know, sometimes when you're into a state of mind or into a certain mood, because mood is an articulation of your emotion, people sometimes say, get over it, right? What do they mean by that? It's such a true statement, but you're stuck. You can't get over it because remember, this is an emotion, and this emotion, as I mentioned, is a memory, and it is a memory which is the product of your past experience. And where is that past experience stored? Remember what I explained a minute ago? In your subconscious. So whatever happened there, it triggered that memory, and bang on, this avalanche of thoughts starts coming in, and thoughts triggers this emotion. This emotion will affect your mood, but in doing so, it also triggers an avalanche of biochemical, neurochemical reactions into your body. So now your body is basically saying, you know, it depends on your mood and mode, you know, like you suddenly feel this feeling in your body, you know, like, I don't feel comfortable at all. Maybe your guts get so constrained, maybe your heart starts palpitation, and maybe your mind also gets scattered into all kinds of things. And guess what? All of that for that emotion created, and the emotion that was the past result of your experience stored in your subconscious suddenly became the basis of it. These are dangerous actions. They're very, very dangerous at the level of the brain, at the level of the body, and more certainly at the level of the mind. So, as I mentioned, the side effect of that is that you begin to see possibilities if you turn them around, that is. So then, learning how to get beyond oneself and learning how to seize the normal analytical processes of how we begin to change and learn another way to do it begins to produce significant, and let me tell you this, measurable changes in one's life. Okay? So you are not the slave of these past memories and emotion unless you are so negative in your approach and you are so captivated and captured by this negativity that you can't come out. It now has translated itself into the body telling you, give me more of these chemicals. I love it. Give me more. You know, sometimes, unfortunately, people have developed a certain nature, that they can't do without a conflict. And they believe this psychological and perhaps even a mental state of mind about being conflicting and conflictual, it's normal for them, you know, and it all depends on how the personality is affected, you know. And now there are many models of personality, but there's one that I like. There are many others, you know, from different schools of psychology. Now, one of them basically classifies thinkers into 5 categories. And it appears the number 5 seems to be very favorable, you know, in many different ways. So what are these 5 categories of thinkers? There is the pragmatist, there is the analyst, there is the realist, there is the idealist, and there is the synthesist. Now, why am I telling you this? Not to bore you with the psychology of thinking, but I'm mentioning this because as individuals, we need to be able to understand and to know what kind of thinker am I dealing with. Am I dealing with an analyst? Am I dealing with a pragmatist? Am I dealing with a realist? Am I dealing with an idealist? Or am I dealing with a synthesist? Now remember, none of these 5 identifications are in a way exclusive. You know, we are a bit, you know, we are kind of predominantly, a person could be an analyst, but he may also be an idealist and a little bit of a realist and so on. So there are combinations of these, and there are ways to actually test this so that, you know, people, if they wanted to, they could come up to kind of know by and large what kind of thinkers they are. So again, just a quick example that if you present a proposition to an analyst and the same proposition to an idealist, how will these 2 propositions be looked at? Well, if you give it to the analyst, he's going to say, wait a minute, I need an objective. I need, how is he going to get there? What road are we taking? What resources that we need? Where the resources are going to come from? Do we have enough to be able to do this, to be able to do that? You know, we need a plan of action, etc., etc. Now, you might say, okay, well, then let's get to work and let's see all the fine details and let's see where we go from point A to B to C and so on. Analyst. That is the quality of an analyst. And you might end up perhaps saying to yourself, you know, if you happen to be the idealist, right, you may end up saying to yourself, without saying to that person, don't be a pain. Because going through all that function is going to be a pain. You're an idealist. You're not an analyst. You understand where this is going, but you say, don't be a pain. So what does the idealist do? If I happen to be that idealist, I'm going to say, what do I care how you get there? As long as you get there and you get the result, that's important. Do you see the kind of thinking? Where all that comes from? Here. It could be whatever elements that you think has led to be. But generally speaking, and I say very generally speaking, people are of that kind of stature. Are you a pragmatist, an analyst, a realist, an idealist, or a synthesist? Which one are you? Which one are you dealing with? And if you have some understanding of that, it helps you communicate with people. Then, as an analyst, you can communicate with a pragmatist or a realist, with a realist can communicate with a synthesist, you know what I'm getting into. And you know what I'm trying to say. So the notion of human communication is based on our personalities and how our mind reacts to all those things. Now, let's get into the main crux of today's presentation about the virtues and the vices. So, as a base of what I'm going to tell you is just coming back from what I just said a few minutes ago. Negative emotions come from toxic thoughts. Okay, to remember that. And according to our holy peers, and not only in the Ismaili spiritual tradition, even in other mystical traditions, in different ways, in different words, in different articulation, in different framework, our holy peer says there are 5 group of thoughts and action that are considered toxic, super toxic. I mean, cyanide. It is so deadly to the mind and body, but it is fatal, totally fatal to the spirit, to the soul. And our holy peers calls these 5 vices, the Ginan that Zebun recited, Panjabune Tame Varo, like, delete, 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 eliminate, smoke it out, like pulverize them. They are known as Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. Now, there are other Ginans that explicitly mentions these, and we could possibly go there, but because I'm more focused on the virtues with the vices, I'll have a Ginan on the virtues in a minute. So, what are these 5 passions or 5 viruses of the mind? Now, thank God we live in the computer age. It's nice to be able to look at these 5 poisons, if you like, or 5 viruses, like a virus that comes into your computer. You know the effect of a virus in your computer. That's why we have antivirus. And perhaps by training or habit or whatever, when you put your laptop or your computer on, at some point or the other, you always want to know, is your antivirus updated? God forbid, if it is not, your computer can be hacked, your data can be compromised, files can be deleted, you know what I'm going into it. So you need your antivirus, and a good antivirus these days. People even steal your identity. In the same way, you need to be able to figure out the antivirus to these 5 negative passions. So what are these 5 deadly viruses? And remember, these viruses, they spread like cancer, they multiply. They are so bad and deadly. If you leave anything there, if you leave even just a little of it, it's almost like a fractal in fractal geometry. You see the whole of it into that little part. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. That's why our holy peers have said, you better cleanse yourself out of this and cleanse yourself, because that is just going to destroy you. And I don't think people in this age, when I say this age in which we live, this age of materialism, this age of sex, material secularism and so on, that basically encourages negative forms of behavior. Why? Because it's lacking spirituality. And as a result of that, people are more concentrated into the pleasure senses. So the first of the 5 virus, I call them these 5 passions of the mind, this 5 boo, panch boo. The first one is calm, K-A-M-A, calm. Literally, calm can mean lust, but calm can also mean if you like, activities conducted for the purposes of pleasing your sense pleasures, your 5 senses. And how is it defined? How is it defined if you look at this particular quality? It is defined by saying calm is, if you say it is lust or the pursuit of your sense pleasure, self-indulgence, needless to say, is the principle of sickness in this cosmic cycle we call Kali Yuga. I'm putting it in a large context because you have to understand this hasn't just come for the sake of it. This has come because of this age. So in this Kali Yuga, the principle of sickness is self-indulgence. Lust, or the degradation of the divinely creative power that in the Western world we say sex. Now, let me just stop here for a minute. I know people don't like to talk about sex because they think it should be something we brush under the carpet. They think it's something that should not be spoken. They think that it's okay to put the facade and think that, well, you know what it is, and you leave that where it is. Yet, do you see what is happening in terms of look at the choices society is making in relationship to the articulation of this element of sex. It is in advertising, it is in movies, it is in documentaries, it is in various series you can be watching on TV. Sex has become something so mundane. It is only there because it's okay, like, go and have a hamburger. It's become that kind of a cheap stuff. And why? It is a gratification of the sense pleasure at that particular level. It is taking your nerves to the level of being an animal. In other words, you've taken your nerves, your lower self, to an animal level. Now, I want to delve into it, but I simply want to make the counterbalance to say, in Islam, sex is defined very, very healthily. There is nothing wrong in articulating the notion of sex. In the Western world, sexuality has become dirty and all that kind of stuff. But I wish someday, somehow, I don't know, we can have a lecture to say, what is the Islamic view about the whole concept of sexuality? Because, particularly among certain segments of people, they can be young and old, whatever, an understanding of this element, that is the divine procreative power without which human beings wouldn't propagate and exist, has a very healthy angle and a very healthy definition. So bear this in mind. So there is a good part of it. So lust, or the degradation of sex, abnormal desires, which includes drugs, alcohol, all kinds of provocative drinks, even loaded tobaccos, or even certain type of foods that are eaten purely and only for the sake of taste, sexual passion. I've mentioned lust, inordinate desire that are not normal, love of pleasure alone, and love of the lower nature, when people engage themselves in, to covet the negative things. Now, you know where I'm going. All of these elements fall under the category of calm. And an aspect which I'm not covering today, but I may just mention it later, it has a terrible effect. All these things, when you get locked into these, yes, in terms of sense pleasure is amazing. But did you notice one thing? One common factor that underlies all of these? They are all transient. You do it, then it's gone. Then you want to do it again, then it's gone again. And then you want to capture it again, then it's done again. Until it comes to a point and it has no longer any value, then you want something else. You see, this is a tendency of that kind of repetition, what I spoke earlier on. The second one is krodh. Now this one here, for some reason, krodh means anger. And for some reason, you can see this element in all the spiritual traditions. In literally all the scriptures you can select. And you know, it's just crazy to think, why is anger listed so negatively? Of course we know, but let me tell you, first of all, by definition, what we call krodh or anger, it is wrath, W-R-A-T-H, rage. Is one of the 5 most dangerous and destructive actions of the mind. It is fury. It is a mental carcinoma, mental cancer. It is also related to slander. So now you can see the other tentacles of anger. Slander, evil gossip, backbiting, profanity, fault-finding, jealousy, malice, impatience, resentment, mockery and destructive criticism, and bearing ill will. I can give you another list. It's all part of this quality called anger. So you know, when we say anger in this sense of the term, it's not just what you say, well, he was just angry. No, what's underlying anger are all these ideas about gossip and backbiting and slander and profanity and it's all related to this virus called anger. These are all its various, tentacles, if you like. Its various poisonous injection. I'll come back later with some of the examples that our beloved Imam had given. Then we have the third one is lobh. Lobh means greed. And greed is expanded into things like to be a miser, miserliness, lying, imagine that, lying, hypocrisy, perjury, misrepresentation, robbery, bribery, and trickery of all sorts. Trickery of all sorts. All falls under the category of lobh or greed. So greed isn't just sometimes we narrowly define it. Oh no. What underlies greed, the elements that provokes that greed and all its children, if you like, are all of these and more. This is why they are so dangerous. You leave one of that thing. You might say to yourself, as an example, you might say, well, you know what? No, I don't want to be greedy. Okay, just let me do this. And by doing that kind of a partial action, you think you have redeemed yourself for being greedy. But you could be a hypocrite. You could be misrepresenting. It can be an act of bribery. All of these are part of greed. And that is lobh, the third one. The fourth one is moh, M-O-H-A, you can say that. Now, moh means attachment. What kind of attachment? There can be positive attachment, negative attachment, just like there is positive anger, negative anger. So what is attachment here? Attachment means delusive attachment. Attachment that is created out of a delusion. I'll come to a sequence of explaining in a minute. So delusive attachment leads to the kind of things. In other words, it is decomposed. When you talk about attachment, it is unpacked into this delusion. It is infatuation, procrastination, worries, anxieties, ignorance, especially ignorance that is led out of false knowledge. I mentioned infatuation, darkness or delusion of the mind, preventing the correct discernment, the correct functioning, and arriving at the truth. In other words, the truth has been hidden, and which lead a human being to believe in the reality of worldly objects alone and tie him to this ordinary, mundane, sensual tendencies and sensual enjoyments. Now, you could be attached to matters of spirituality, but this attachment is to do in relation to everything that is, call it, animal in nature. Needless for me to go further into that, but you understand. Everything that is animal in nature. Every time your reaction has to do with saying to yourself that, this attachment, you're attached to something. You basically have to see what is the emotional reaction to that attachment. What happens when that attachment is compromised? Come to that in a minute. The fifth virus, the fifth negative element, the fifth bad passion is called mad. Mad, spelled M-A-D-A, the A silent. What is mad? Mad means pride, but not just pride. It means vanity. It means things like self-admiration, bigotry, self-assertion, obtrusive show of wealth, or obtrusive show of power, bossiness, scolding, fault-finding, liking publicity, making a show of religion. Oh, I'm so spiritual. Oh, I'm so sensitive, that kind of stuff. And being noisy about when people express an act of charity or they've done good in society. They want recognition for it and all of that. And this notion of mud, which is pride and vanity, is exactly where the ego hits you hard. Now, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. They are the five cancer, the five viruses, the five negative passion. And what happens? You get entangled into them, like into a spider's web of it. I wish I had another couple of hours tonight to go into all the details. I will do it at some point, and I'm chunking it out so that, none of us gets overwhelmed. So let me continue a little bit. I know I'm going to be over my time of 9:30 that I say, but at this stage, in bringing to you, and I'm quite sure we will have a continuation next week, but I really want to complete these five virtues and vices. So these were the five vices. Now, listen to this Gnan. It's a pre-recorded Gnan. And this beautiful Gnan and beautiful Raga, and by the way, all our reciters, I must say, we are so blessed to have them recite parts of Gnan into these sessions that is spiritually enriching our spirit and intellectually illuminating us with knowledge. And that includes, and I remember with love and affection, our present host, Nayab, who recited the Gnan just not so long ago. And it's so nice, and I'm not just saying that for her, but because it reflected an element that actually touched the emotion and the soul, and that's what Ginans do. So listen to this one. And by the way, this Gnan is recited by Fatima Dhanani, who lives in Calgary. She's blessed with such a beautiful voice. and truly giving of herself in guiding and making people available to understand many things in the practice of our spirituality. Now, I have not asked her permission to do so, so I'm thanking her in advance here to say, Fatima, thank you, and Mola bless you for that. Because of that, I am today playing this verse of Ginan that you beautifully recited and related to the 5 virtues. So please listen.
Sata saburi anekhamiya mango imana salamata zikare tamme jagoji imana salamata zikare tamme jagoji he viramara araja karo tame maheraja mango zikara fi karakari raheni ma he jagoji zikara fi karakari raheni ma he jagoji.
Thank you very much, Fatima. This is truly marvelous and to the point to this part of my presentation. And if you have heard and followed the verses of this Ginan, Sat, Saburi, Zikr, Kamiya, and Iman. These are the 5 antivirus of those viruses. And what powerful antivirus. I have to tell you from now, these 5 antiviruses require each one of them a proper explanation in detail. But for tonight, you just have to accept what I'm telling you. But you see why it makes sense, because they are so powerful. So Sat. Sat refers to truth. Saburi. Saburi refers to patience. Zikr refers to, literally speaking, remembrance. Kamiya refers to tolerance. And Iman refers to faith. Now, I know these are words you've heard before, and I also know you have in your head, in your mind, in your understanding, your own conception, which is okay and perfectly acceptable. But please remember, when our Holy Peer says Sat, what truth is the Holy Peer referring to? When he says Saburi or patience, is it the patience that you have because you have some motive, some integrated idea behind it? When the Holy Peer says Zikr, that's not the Zikr what people generally think. And when they say Zikr, they say, oh, it's remembrance. So there are aspects behind it that needs to be really expounded in greater detail. And then there is Kamiya, tolerance, and Iman, faith. Now, how do these 5 antivirus hang together? And for the time that I have, it's 9:30. I'll just take a few minutes now, but I will continue in greater detail in my next lecture. Even though we may have to have a part 4 for the neuroscience part, we will have to do it, but I would not leave you in the lurch. So these 5 antivirus, they hang together on the basis that when applied, let me give you the general principle first. When applied, what do? They provide a basis for purification. Purification from what? Purification from that garbage, from that antivirus that you took from those viruses that Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. Now go back just a few minutes back when I mentioned to you how impressionable your mind can be, because the mind is very, very subtle and pure. And through these actions of the negative passions and through the impact and the imprint that these viruses of Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad leave in your mind, guess what it does to the mind? It pollutes the mind. It's pollution of the worst kind. And when that pollution enters the mind, guess what happens? The mind that is designed to transmit the light of the soul, that mind starts becoming black. It can no longer transmit the needed light for the purpose for which it is intended. And then what happens? Whatever light the mind is able to transmit, even in such darkness, it's so dim that it creates that impact, remember, into your brain and then into your being. And what kind of behavior do you think you will exhibit when you have corrupted and polluted your mind? That's why the corruption and pollution of the mind is something that really needs to be examined. And I will try my best, but I will try to present to you the pathologies that emerges out of this reaction between the mind and the body. Because you know why I want to do that, and why I'm keen to do that, at least to some degree, is because most of us, if not all of us, in any which way, we value our body. So I would ask you, don't you value your body? Of course we do. And we are supposed to. Because Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam, in Islam also it says, the body is a temple in which the soul, the light of God, lives. This is also known as the temple of God. How do you keep your temple? You know, a temple, call it Jamaat Khana, call it a mosque, call it a mandir, call it a church, call it a synagogue, call it whatever other forms of whatever other places are there where worship takes place. In the same way, this is a temple. Now, if you say this is a temple of God, and indeed it is, because remember, the notion of the heart is where the Lord lives. And we are trying to create this coherence, heart and brain. Now what happens? You are bringing all this garbage at the level of your heart, because that's where the temple is actually manifest and present. That's where the temple is. Now you have these elements of Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. Really? And now you expect to rise high in whatever shape or form? All this garbage creates cancer in your mind and all the functioning of your mind. So now the mind is so black, the mind is so corrupted, just like a file in a computer gets so corrupted, eventually you have to delete the file. What will remove this darkness? So we say the 5 antivirus: Sat, Saburi, Zikr, Kamiya, and Iman. And among these, the notion of Zikr, which people says remembrance, it is, but what kind of remembrance? Zikr means prayer of the heart. We spoke about the heart just a minute ago. See, it's a prayer of the heart. Make the link, make the connection. Now, if you will permit me, although I have mentioned these elements and you understand them to some degree, because I need at least 25 minutes to go into explaining the inner meaning of the notion of Sat, Saburi, Zikr, Iman, and Kamiya. So I will do that in my 3rd lecture next week, but I don't want to close this lecture without mentioning to you something very important. The notion of these 5 viruses, right? This Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. Do you know how are these interrelated and expressed into the mystical literature? Let me tell you. It says this articulation comes from the mystics who taught these elements to people who are mature to understand them. And again, I'm giving you basically a brief overview, and we'll go with it on details. And what does it say? It says, for a human being dwelling on the object of senses, an attachment is born. To them, an attachment is born. From attachment, a desire is born. And from desire, anger is born. And from anger arises delusion. And from delusion, wandering of the memory. And from memory wandering, the destruction of intelligence. And from destruction of intelligence, the human being is lost. So think of this sequence, how they hang together. Attachment, desire, anger, delusion, wandering of the memory, and destruction of intelligence. This is how those 5 viruses, the 5 negative passion hangs together. And this is the kind of damage they create. Now, I really want to explain more about the notion of attachment, desire, and anger, and delusion, and the wandering of the memory and destruction of intelligence. And then, in addition to the Sat, Saburi, Kamiya, Zikr, and Iman, what has our holy peer and our beloved Imams in our history taught us as a solution? How do you actually correct all of that? And from the perspective of our tariqah, which I will inshallah speak in the next session. But as I'm closing this session, and because I said I'm going to say something about the mind and purification of the mind, and remember this is linked to the antivirus getting rid of this thing. So let me read you what it says about the purification of the mind related to concentration. Okay, I said I'll speak about concentration. Why can't you concentrate? You know, people always have this question about concentration, right? Almost feels like concentrated orange juice. You know, what's concentration? What is the concentration part? Look how these mystical teachings, and some of these come from Rumi himself. And it says, purification of the heart, which gives concentration, is obtained through unselfish action. You see the link? Purification of the heart, which gives concentration. So there is a notion of purity related to concentration, but it's obtained through unselfish action. And then when concentration is obtained, then actions are performed, actions are directed for the good of others. This is a signal, a cue. Thirdly, attainment of concentration means freedom from attachment to the sense objects and actions, and the renunciation of all personal desires. Is it possible that a person can renounce all desires? Yes, there is a way. But do you see where concentration is going? Why aren't you able to concentrate? Is it due to Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, or Mat? Or the combination of? What mischief are these viruses playing? But let me not leave you without the absolute foundation for the success in all of these, all of these, including the purification of the mind. And that is the sound, the sound, the sound. Please remember this. It has a fantastic, phenomenal, transformative effect in all of the negative stuff that we say, and in producing and engendering all the positive stuff. It is understanding this concept of dasan at the cellular level of our body, at the manifestation of our mind, and the effect it does into our heart and spirit. Thank you very much for being so patient. Inshallah, with Mawla's mercy and grace, I will continue next week with bringing all these other elements together. We will analyze them together, and we will seek further meaning and clarification, and basically go from there. Nayab, back to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. I think we all look forward to analyzing that with you. Even when you said I would go on past 25 minutes, no one left the session. So just wanted you to know that. I am going to pass it on to Sharon now, and then she will continue the Q&A.
Thank you for being there in the beginning. Allah bless you for that. Yalimadat Sharon.
Yalimadat, everyone. Thank you, Dr. H, first and foremost, for that amazing lecture. Very, very enriching dialogue. Thank you to all 300, almost 300 people that were on during this lecture. I think we can all say we've learned a lot, and hopefully we're able to incorporate that into our daily lives. I'd like to take a moment and just say some prayers for Dr. H for this great work that you do. May Mola continue to give you strength to share this gnosis and knowledge with us. And may you continue to have good health and continued abundance in all facets of your life. And as we've learned today, may all viruses of all types stay away from you, family, and all of us. So thank you so much. And Dr. H, if you would be so kind to give us some blessings.
May Mawla's hand be upon all of you to protect you, to guide you, to keep you safe from these viruses. May Mawla inspire your heart, your thoughts, your reasoning, your intellect to be on the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim, and to engender and integrate the values that Mawla Bapa wants us to exhibit in our material and spiritual life. May Mawla bless you with strength of the sound. Mawla bless you all with strong iman. Mawla Bapa bless you all with his remembrance, continuous remembrance of Mawla Bapa's name. May it bring you blessing, success, and light in all your endeavors. May Mawla Bapa accept your tasbihs. Mawla Bapa accept your dua and prayers. May you have no difficulty in your material and spiritual life. If there is any obstacle, may Mola Bapa remove it out of His grace, mercy, and compassion. May Mola Bapa make it happen that you have a fully enlightened heart, brain, coherence, and may you express that love, compassion, gratitude, and all the blessings that comes with it. And may Mola Bapa bless you with Zahiri Batini Dida. Ameen. Ameen.
Ameen. Ameen. Thank you so much. And so with that, this will be a good exit point for anyone who wants to leave before we start the Q&A. And for any participants who would like to ask a question, we will open that up right now. The hand icon, which is found under the participant heading on your screen. So we will go ahead and take some questions, and you can also email the address that's listed in the chat, and you can put some in the chat as well. So we will start with, we have a hand, it looks like unmute and ask your question.
Yali Madad, Missionary Sahib.
Mulali Madad.
It was a great lecture, and I have a quick question about one of the antivirus which is affecting me a lot, which is a destructive force I have, the anger.
Yes.
And I've been trying hard. So I have this Sat Saburi, and I'm doing the zikr, and I'm always praying to Mola Bapa, please get rid of this thing. But I think so, I'm still struggling. And I have a, inside me, I have a faith, like one day I'm going to reach that level where this destructive force is going to go away from my body. But
Yes.
is that faith enough? Because sometimes I feel like I should take some anger management classes, but I just feel like if I trust Mola Bapa and do bandagi and all that, it's going to go away eventually, because I believe like I'm following the truth, like I'm trying not to say lies, all those good qualities I'm trying to imbibe inside me. So I'm feeling like slowly it's going to go away, because I have heard like there are like, if your energy goes in the higher level, like from the lower level, like we talk about nafse ammara, and go to the higher level, it eventually get rid of those destructive force. Is that true? Can you give me some light on those things, sir?
Yes, there is a lot of truth in what you say. But look, I have to say this to you in the clearest term. The first thing you yourself need to analyze for you is to ask yourself and say, what purpose does this anger serve to you? To you, I'm talking particularly. Secondly, do you really intend to get rid of it? Because remember, many of the negative or many of these viruses that we have spoken of this evening, they are very pleasant at their own level, so people keep wanting them. That's why they are there. Now, I'm not suggesting that you want them. I'm not even suggesting that you welcome them. And I know that what you said, you are seeking a solution, and you need to dig a little deeper in your own mind and in your own heart and basically say to yourself, what is it that is triggering this anger? And you know, like I said earlier on in my talk, these are memories of the past. They come back and they replay, and you haven't gotten over it. And the fact that you haven't gotten over it, it does become a serious problem, because, as you said, that you are seeking to improve, but this particular one is really tricky. So let me say to you this. Look, a lot can be said, and there's nothing wrong in going and take classes in anger management, because you will learn a lot of things about the psychology of anger. Next week, I may be speaking about the spiritual concept of anger, or rather the spiritual remedy of anger. But the one thing our beloved Imam has taught us, Mola Bapa said to us in quoting Hazrat Ali sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he say? Two things amongst others. remember the word forbearance. I really need you to understand this word at the deepest level of your being, okay? And look up the proper meaning of this word. Forbearance is one of the antivirus, and it falls into the category of this notion of tolerance. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, which I've said, I think, in my lecture maybe yesterday, that you need to be able to exercise, and this is what our Holy Peer teaches us, you need to be able to exercise the capacity of your reason, okay? Your ability to reason it out, and combine that with forbearance. So let's say something suddenly made you angry. You know very well that before this anger is expressed, you have a little gap between when the thought comes and when the physical action takes place. What happened is this: when the trigger has come in, whatever it may be that caused it, right there and then you need to remember, use your reason, and said, no, I'm not going to become angry. Change the thought by your words inside. No, I know I'm angry here, so this part of me is telling me, do it, become angry. But this part of me says, no, I'm not going to do it. And because my Imam told me, my Mola Bapa told me, forbearance, tolerate it, swallow your pride, swallow who you are, walk out of there. Do not express that anger. Now, I know you might say this is really hard to do, but you know what? This is a technique our beloved Imam taught us. If you use the ability of your reason to say you don't want this thing, and you made a decision, you said, no, I know this part is telling me to do it. And remember, this is the battle that goes on, right? There's a part of us that say, no, don't do it. This is not good. I know it's not good. I know I've been told not to do it. But there is other part that says, oh, come on, go and do it. Nothing is going to happen. Just go do it. Satisfy yourself. No. Allow your reason, and I mean your reason, your akal to guide you, and express forbearance. Tolerate it. Doesn't matter if it tears you apart. It doesn't matter if suddenly you feel you're going to explode. Then I would say to you, explode. Do not become angry. Do you know what is going to happen when you use your reason and you tolerate? You know what's going to happen? There will be a positive energy flow inside yourself to your brain. It will give you the satisfaction. Do you remember some time back when I was talking about the psychology of relationship, and we are talking about forbearance here, tolerance? What did our peer says? Nari purushnu ek dharam, kamiya rakho to na lage karam. This applies to anger also. When there is tolerance between two people, they may be husband and wife. In this case, it is Nari Purush, man and the woman. If the concept of tolerance is there will be no negative karma. But in order to exercise this kamiya, which is in this verse, forbearance, you need to allow your reason to guide you, not your emotions. Okay? Because remember, anger is an emotion, and emotions are the end product of your experience. So you really have to come to terms and put these pieces together. Forgive me, I didn't mean to give you personal counseling per se, but this is an important aspect of our being that really needs to be understood, like I said, at the deepest level. So please do some homework. look at the notion of tolerance and patience and your exercise of your emotion and come to terms with it. If you still have any issues with it, please do send a message and I can speak with you individually. Mola bless you.
Thank you for that, Dr. H. Another question that we have in our chat, and everyone, we will do our best to get to as many questions as we can, but being cognizant of time, we will address them in future sessions. So feel free to add them into the chat. A question we had, Dr. H, was, the octagon was mentioned in the last lecture as angels holding the God's throne in Quran. Can you please provide the reference of that verse?
I don't have the book of the Quran in front of me, but I'd be delighted to provide you that verse. And that verse is such a beautiful verse. And as I said, many of the teachings about the hereafter and the Quran itself is expressed in the manifestation of architecture. And of course, architecture is laden with geometry. And in this particular case, the octagon, which is one of the geometric figures in our Dalkhana in Vancouver, this is the Dalkhana of Canada, and it is in reference to these 8 angels supporting the throne of God. And in the future, I will be giving a lecture on angels alone. Who are these angels? Where do they come from and what they mean? And so I've made a note, a mental note, and I will find that verse for you.
Added it in the chat. It's chapter 69, verse 17. So
Okay.
this one is in there. Thank you for that. I think we might have time for one more question. Maybe we'll see. A question that was asked, Dr. H, was, can you please elaborate on the notion of sex in Islam and how it is different from Western conceptions?
It requires a proper explanation in that, so we don't get lost into the psychological rigmarole of how in Western psychology and even in Western sociology, these things are expressed. But let me just at least give you some kind of a clue that the body, the human body, is where the psychic, mental, and physical manifestation is of the human being. These 3 elements combine and they come together. And the notion of sexuality in Islam is extremely healthy because it is a recognition, first of all, of a divine force. It is a creative force. And that force that is divine and that is given to human being in trust. It is a trust of God to the human being, how that force that comes from the source of divinity must be exercised and used. And the notion of the exercise and use includes human pleasure. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Holy Prophet, has many hadiths in terms of this relationship at the very intimate level and what they mean and how, in fact, the Prophet guided people to be human about it and to express it in a clear and clean understanding, and not to think that this is something dirty and something bad, but rather understand with everything that is material, there is a spiritual element. And I need time to go into those layers so that there can be no misunderstanding.
So we will add that along with some other questions to our future sessions. We are at the 10 o'clock mark, so I think we're at a good stopping point. Any questions, like I've said, please feel free to add it in the chat. We will do our best to address this in future sessions. We look forward to everybody joining us next week for the 3rd part. Dr. H, any last words before we conclude tonight's? presentation?
My last words, thank you to yourself, to Nawab, to all the other hosts, co-hosts that were there today to really help out in managing the whole process, which is not a one person's job. And I say with love and affection, all of you add so much love, so much creativity. And I want to define that. I want to say you bring your own energies in the process. And I know everyone, consciously, subconsciously, are benefiting from this energy, as I am, and therefore I am articulating it. And I say thank you for being there for all of us. Mola bless you, fulfill all your wishes. And to all the hosts and all those who have helped, the Ginan reciters and so on, Mola bless you with barakat and barakat and barakat. And whatever your wishes are, may Mola Bapa fulfill them for you. Ameen.
Ameen.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of us, it is our honor and privilege to be able to serve you, serve the Jamaat, serve the community. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone. We wish everyone a safe week ahead and lots of blessings, light, and love for all that's to come. Good night, everyone. Yali Madat.
Yali Madat, Sharon. Yali Madat, everyone.